Is a list of magical entities from Chinese medicine and their associated element from an alchemy perspective. And then on this other side is the Nijing 2, which is the chart that acupuncture uses when directing the Shen. We also have my Shen, Miss Ma'am, Charla. Um, and so the Shen in Chinese, how do I want to set this up? I'm just contemplating out loud. So I am not necessarily attempting to communicate right now, but the idea that there are two main directions of empathy, cognitive and emotional, right? That there's one kind of empathy that we have where we're feeling with, and there's another kind of empathy that we have where we're thinking with or perceiving with. And how unique every individual's perception is, and also how impossible it really is for me to know everything about somebody else's lived experience. And something I really like about Chinese medicine is that it's a system of systems that's rooted in complexity. So I have some books with me. I just went to my bookshelf. I have notes on complexity. This goes into Buddhism and different kinds of complexity theories. And then I also have a big fat fancy book called The Systems View of Life, which was written by Friedhof Capra. I don't know who Peter Luisi is. Dr. Capra wrote The Tao of Physics, The Turning Point. He's one of the big physics slash consciousness researchers. And I'm contemplating all of this with the Nijing 2, this chart from Chinese medicine, because we can look at that as though it's nanotubes from a physics perspective, from a consciousness perspective. And that feels to me very connected to empathy. So we'll just have to see how today goes. But let's take a look at what is complexity. So notes on complexity, a scientific uh, theory of, what does it say? Connection, consciousness, and being. Um, complexity is complexity is what happens when coal turns into a diamond, or carbon, pardon me, turns into a diamond instead of coal. Complexity is what happens when the sperm and the egg get together and they make a zygote, and the zygote becomes a whole embryo. Complexity is how our relationships within our body are between our different systems. So, as they're personified in Chinese medicine, fire goes with our heart, earth goes with digestion, metal goes with respiration, water goes with also digestion, is cleaning the kidneys, and wood has to do with growth. But this interface here, the Nijing 2, as one of the ways to contemplate the pathways that these Shen go through. And these Shen, these magical mysticals, are themselves reminders of various virtues and challenges that any individual might happen to experience on the planet. So there's your broad overview of the Shen. Please ask me questions. I think we're contemplating the Shen. We're contemplating. Contemplating is just like having ideas, but not necessarily looking for answers. This is my cat. Hi. All right. A science of being. Nothing in the universe is more complex than life. The complexity of all the rich abundance has long resisted explanation. What biological wonders might emerge? We don't even know. That's my cat. She's a biological wonder. Complexity theory is the study of how systems manifest in the world, how complex systems manifest in the world. It sounds so out there, friends. Complexity. Do you remember? Okay, well, maybe not everybody was the same kind of nerd I was in grade school. I was an English nerd in grade school. And when we started dissecting, not dissecting, diagramming sentences to learn the parts of speech, the study of systems, complexity. I'm describing my first interaction with complexity right now, Lizzie, when I was a kid and learning how to diagram sentences. And there's a simple sentence, right? Joe goes bike riding. And then there's all these like really complex sentences that might be like, given the blah, blah, blah nature of this thing, comma, within the framework of blah, 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 semicolon, and it looks like you have a whole paragraph for a sentence. There's a way to diagram that so that you can see the complexity. And as soon as somebody put that in front of me, I was like, oh, this is how I understand the world. So, from a grown-up perspective, what complexity theory and I'm reading from somebody else's book, so it's not necessarily just my understanding. The use of the word complexity does not mean complicated. It means a class of patterns and interactions that are open-ended, evolving, adaptive, and self-sustaining. And I'm again showing you this in front of these elements from Chinese medicine and this visualization of our connective tissue, because the way the somatics of Chinese medicine work is we feel it in our tissues and it's very, very complex. So here, this writer, who is this, Neil Thies, says, a distinguishing feature of life's complexity is that in every single instance, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that is a Gestalt statement. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where it's like when you look at a piece of art or like a mountain, or you are presented with the most amazing looking dish ever in the whole, oh my gosh, and you're like, wow, that kind of awareness of the whole. So empathy simply is to have it's an ability, which is unfortunate to put it that way, but to perceive and or feel as others around us do. And those are very complex contemplations. And the more trauma that we're carrying, the more neurodivergence that we're carrying, and also just the more chaotic the world we're in is, the less linear some of these questions become. So let's just continue with this complexity here. Yes, complexity theory arose and blah, blah, blah. Complexity is like gardening. You plant a garden and you have to figure out where you are, what is aren't there different zones for plants? And then like, how much light do I have? How much space do I have? You're asking questions about what grows when, if you're going to be harvesting food, when does that, all of that, that's complexity. Just very simply, running a household is a complex thing to do, right? Contemplating where are the kids going, what's happening here, where are the resources, all of that is complex. It's not linear. There are things that are going to bring pressure from the outside. You might have pressure coming in from the inside, waking up in the morning. Exactly. How is my body to gravity today, right? So I wrote a Substack article. I've been looking for ways to get folks excited about the Shen. And yesterday I wrote a Substack article about empathy, cognitive and emotional empathy. And it occurred to me that we can use the Shen to contemplate that without any of us having to have either cognitive or emotional empathy, right? That there's cognitive and emotional in all of us, where cognitive is the thought, the matrix. This is the matrix of the body here, the Nijing 2 of the body, not the mind. And then these Shen would be called strange attractors in a chaos theory perspective, but they're very much like catalysts and just little soldiers that we can ask to do things for us. And because they're aligned and assigned by element, they have a consistent and persistent way of showing up. So the fire element in Chinese medicine has to do with joy, has to do with life force energy, has to do with qi, whereas the metal element has to do with discernment and with precision. And these entities themselves assist with those lived experiences in our tissues, in our organs. And Chinese medicine very kindly also positions and places emotions in the organs. So, from an emotional empathy perspective, whether or not you and I agree what anger is or how it feels, if we're practicing with these Shen, say, and we're looking at wood here with the Hun, and the Hun governs anger, governs forgiveness. And the Hun is aligned with or associated with the organ, our liver. Hello. Hi, how are you? I'm happy that you're here, Illusion. Then cultivating skillfulness or cultivating relationship with Hun theoretically would also cultivate relationship with or skillfulness with an experience of anger and forgiveness. Thank you for saying you're happy to see me. I have been doing, can I just have a little moment of 6-year-old Katie here? Because I have been adulting, okay? I've been adulting. Very happy that I've been adulting. Ooh, but I'm definitely activated from adulting. So let's just like, first of all, get all here together since now we have a few folks here. So we'll start with sense of bum. Sense of bum is the part where you remember that you have a body, that you exist, and that you're on a surface. Very simply. My physics folks, gravity. That's all it is, gravity. Okay? Now, notes on complexity. Ooh, do we want to discuss quantum strangeness? Yes. Let's take a look at quantum strangeness because I would love it if you would give yourself permission to contemplate the Shen 3 ways from a physics perspective. classic Newtonian, fully dependent on, wholly dependent, gravity is God. The Einsteinian relativistic astrophysics, how do the planets go? And then the quantum, which is the inverse of astrophysics. And these Shen genuinely can transform, transmute, transcend. They are not bound by gravity and space-time in the same way that you and I are. As the Shen of our body, though, specific to our body, which is why I'm show because there are Shen all over this alchemy, all over. This is the get out of gravity card in Taoist physics. You invoke the Shen. But there are special Shen that are associated with our lived experience in our, oh Lord, here comes Norman, lived experience in our body and also in the experience of like inherited trauma and different kinds of gestational and like birthright stuff that happens once you're born. Norman. Okay. So so there are three basic kinds of physics if you're a KDZ and you don't do math, but you understand physics. The first kind is the one where Newton was sitting and the thing fell on his head and he was like, "Oh, gravity." This may not be the best thing to align it with. That is equal to entropy. Entropy at the level of we cannot break away from the fact that we are mortal creatures. Okay. There's only so far a human can climb up a mountain without support of oxygen, say for an example. And I'm pointing to the wood element here because the wood element is how we grow, but it's also a lot of how we're limited in our growth. In that, in Taoist alchemy, the wood element, that's the element that maps to the body experience. So if you wanted to turn these five Shen into different experiences of empathy, one thing you could do would be to contemplate wood as the body, soma, not necessarily emotion, but like just physical, the body. And then, because that is the corporeal soul in the alchemy, corporeal having to do with the tactile, the gross physical form. We have a much bigger limitation based on our physical form than we do based on our mind often, right? Otherwise, we would not have inventions. What is your issue, sir? Norman would like you to know he's suffering very deeply. So the way the cognitive empathy could work if you want to contemplate complex, my goodness me, lots of words. But if you want to contemplate complex, then the idea would be like, well, in the wood element, if wood is about growth, it's associated with our liver and our gallbladder. So that has to do with like the filter of the body. Liver, gallbladder would have to do with things like the experience of consuming alcohol or any other kind of medication that might go through the liver. Or it could have to do with growing a family. The wood element numerologically is related to families. The wood element in our body very much is the fascia. It's the web, the matrix of us, which again, Chinese medicine just illustrates so beautifully with this chart. Please excuse me. Cognitive empathy is where we get this whole idea of the double empathy problem and theory of mind. I haven't looked at theory of mind in a while. Sometimes I get it wrong. Essentially, it's a very much like um, for a stranger in a strange land where there are some neurotypes. It's specific to autism, but you could apply it to other concepts where autistic humans and allistic. So allistic means not autistic, not necessarily not neurodivergent. But if an autistic and a non-autistic human are talking, there's very often a lack of shared awareness. How do I explain neurodivergent? That is such a good question. Um, Neurodivergent is a descriptor. It's not necessarily a clinical term, and it has to do with data, statistics. Let me show you. So in any given population, welcome to Statistics 101 with Katie Z. In any given population, you're going to have a bell curve. And I think this ends up being like five. We'll just say it ends up being five sections, 20% each, right? Well, here's how neurodivergent. This is what neurodivergent is statistically, and then we can look at it culturally. So statistically speaking, divergent generally would be anything more than one or two standard deviations away from the mean. This is pretty much all I remember, okay? Because we're getting into to fractions and math. I don't do that. So that, like my eyes, for an example, I have neurodivergent eyes because I need corrective lenses. Neurodiversity is the steady state of humans. We are not standardized as a species. We standardize based on laws and based on guidelines and based on our culture and what's happening in our culture around us. So neurodivergent, and I use that word too, means different than what a neuro usual might be. And then we go into, well, what does that mean? How does that show up? So that's what neurodivergent is. There are a few different ways to be neurodivergent. And wouldn't you know, the Shen are a wonderful way to contemplate that as well. I might actually, though, want to look at my notes here. So, oh, hold on. I need to go on to, there we go. I'm very popular with my phone today, the odd overthinkers. So you can be, hold on, let me find it. First of all, I just want to say, anytime you are contemplating Shen, essentially we're just looking for three. That's all the Shen practically, like from a practitioner, from a contemplating thing. Shen, magical mystical entities, that just means we're looking for a third thing. Okay. So there you can be, oh, I just want to make sure I'm giving you the three main groups. Hold on. There are three categories of neurodivergence. This is not standardized even like all over the place. And you can acquire neurodivergence. That would be like complex trauma or acquiring a disability, uh, a TBI, any kind of main change like that. There's also neurodivergence, which is contemplated as clinical. That is stuff like borderline personality disorder and other labels that are in the DSM. Okay, these are broad and general. General. The third way of neurodivergence is applied, or just like that which we're born with, which can also show up in the DSM. Synesthesia, autism, Tourette's, any number of things. The the way that neurodivergence is addressed very often depends on the context that you're in. So for most of us, we're going to experience that in mental health care. For many of, I shouldn't say for most, for many of us, we're going to experience it in mental health care, right? With the labels of anxiety as an example. That is a cognitive idea. Just to take this back to empathy. Anxiety genuinely is an idea. It is very trendy right now. Neurodivergence is a big word right now. It became pretty big culturally during the beginning and the height of the pandemic. It's also a very exciting way to bring a larger platform underneath neurodiversity. But neurodivergence, in my experience, is skewed. The bias is towards able-bodied, late diagnosed, like white women. There's a little bit of a skinny white yoga chick factor. But I will say that divergence or diversity of experience is something that Chinese medicine and these kinds of complex systems assume and already have room for. Okay? So we're stepping out of the Western, we're stepping out of simple, we're moving into complex. This is a little bit like baking with the mind. We're not just like building salads or having a sundae. But also, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to get confused and see pretty things. This is a good thing. So, but those three kinds of neurodivergence are really important because of the clinical piece. The Western medicine is going to it's going to default to the clinical setting. And the clinical setting currently, at least in the United States, is the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, if that's the subtext. I can't remember the subtitle. So what I would like us to do here is like, that is the thing that we know. We can add on to it and contemplate on top of it. As an example, let's try to have some empathy right now for what might be called bipolar, right? For the experience of not being able to regulate your emotions and going up and down, not being able to regulate your emotions going, okay, great. Whether or not we identify with that, it is a thing that can happen. Elementally, KZ, I'm going to contemplate it, maybe guide you to it in two different ways. The first way is through the fight, and that is the fire element, having to do with the heart and the pericardium, the pumping, the action, the reaction, the sympathetic response, the fight flight response in the trauma response. And also, though, because of the Shen, joy and compassion and love. Also, adrenaline, yes, down with our kidneys. That was the other one I was going to bring in. It's like the other element is just in this frame would be water. So you're flipping between fire and water. But the empathy aspect would be in this framework of Chinese medicine to contemplate the Shen, the fire Shen. And what did I tell you about the Shen? Hold on. Oh, I'm so glad that my animals are not getting ready to attack me anymore. This is just in a little picture book I wrote. It's on my website. Shen is the spirit of the heart and love and hate. Um, the sound that we can all do, the sound for the Shen for the heart is Ha, which will vibrate into the nanotubes of the fascia of our body. It's amazing. Shen has to do with the virtue of it's the leader who's not a cult leader, which is a really hard leader to be. Sometimes the Shen in the heart is called like the original Shen or our diamond Shen in our organs. And in and out of balance, the Shen's going to show up a couple ways. In balance, Shen's going to just be like treading water, being all smooth. And let me look at my notes so I'm not just being like that. Um, you're going to see uh, feelings and expressions of connection. I'm saying feelings and expressions, not necessarily definable specific behaviors, because how I show that and how you show that might be different. The Shen from a brain perspective, so cognitive is brain. Cognitive science, at least as I have been taught for the last however many decades, cognitive science, brain. Hello, heavy fruits. So our Shen, the fire element, if we're again just having the contemplation of empathy as complexity and not just simple, then we're going to contemplate the Shen here in the prefrontal cortex itself. The prefrontal cortex meaning the part of our brain that's like the smart part of our brain, the part of our brain that develops once we're about 25, 26. Prefrontal cortex having to do with how we monitor things around us, how we're aware of our own experience of regulation, our own experience of reasoning and awareness, just as a metaphor. I'll see you soon. This water, well, let's just go down the line. So the earth element there with yi, the emotional aspects, if we're going to cultivate emotional empathy, the emotions are trust and worry. And this yi is positioned in the map of the body in our spleen, which is over here. Told you to live till 26. Well, that's good. I'm glad. So the yi goes with our spleen and the experiences of trust and worry, the same brain reason. Let me go grab some water. I'll be right back. I do want to share the media library I put together. It doesn't introduce the Shen this way, and you meet all the Shen. It's very good. All right, so Earth, Yi, spleen. Spleen equals immune system, as well as digestion. But it's a good thing to contemplate your spleen. Spleen's full all the time as well, whereas stomach is going to like be active and get hungry and things. In the Nijing too, the chart of the inner landscape, the ox, you could look at the ox as though it is the stomach, and then the ox herd as though he is the spleen. So that's the emotional. Okay. Somatically, having to do with digestion. Somatically, also having to do this yi, with the earth element, having to do with our experience of ground in and of itself, of gravity in and of itself, back to physics. Where is the body? Right? Three body problems kind of thing. Cognitively, this is going to have to do with will and the ego as far as discernment, decisions. I do not know enough about human design to speak to it. Um, but okay, cool. Projector. I don't know what a projector is. We're going to stay with Chinese medicine here, though. It's nice that they seem to have some resonance because I know he took most of it from TCM, so that's great. The Yi, do you know the whole worrywart? Also, the Rachel Dratch character from SNL, where she's like, wah, wah, like everybody's excited, and then she comes in with the like that kind of, or Eeyore, who is really depressed, but also just like the kind of worry, rumination, getting stuck with, yep, getting stuck in thought loops. Let me see what I wrote you about the earth. So the power of the Yi is profound, like a processor. This is our default mode network, by the way. The Yi, this earth element here, this is the, I'm just assigning it to, like mapping it to, okay, corresponding it to the part of the brain that's active during rest and digest. There's a whole network in the brain, a neural network in the brain. It's the default mode network. So default mode is gentle self-awareness. Gentle self-awareness. Just hanging out in the park, maybe looking at the stream going by. So the Yi is a processor shifting through encounters, providing context to our consciousness and our emotional health and how we derive nourishment from life's events, plural, are deeply impacted by the state of our Yi. Cool, cool, cool. Metal. Look how much space, look at all of the ways that you can have cognitive and emotional empathy now. Look at all the ways. Now we're with Po. Po is metal. That is our lungs. That's the grief and courage from an emotional perspective, grief and courage. From a fascia perspective, from a connective tissue perspective, our lungs and just the whole experience of respiration at all is one of the first most direct ways we can start to intervene and influence how these little entities are hanging out and what they're doing. So one of the first places that humans are guided when it comes to things like stress management and tantra even is the breath. And that is Po, and that is metal, not ether. Metal, the metal element. This is discernment. Metal element is like planning. The metal element balances the wood element. Metal element is the visionary soul. The metal element in Chinese medicine would, in some ways, is a way to contemplate the very geometry of the universe and the fabric of space-time itself, because metal creates all the matrices in within one dimension and across dimension. Super cool. Oh my goodness. That is amazing. With our lungs, with Poe, the emotions are grief and courage. And then the sound that balances that is S. And you get that in the books, you get that in all the free stuff when you download it, get it in the what is that thing called? Crash Course too, but it's S. So the empathy, cognitive empathy of Poe is cognitive empathy around other people's grief. It would be learning ways to, like, is that how it would really look like from that perspective? This is also just like practical space planning, just very practical. You want to put together an event and have people sit at tables. You're kind of hanging out with Poe because you're going to be putting them places. That is super cool. We did briefly discuss the water element here. It was Zhu or Zher, pardon me. I get her name weird often. Kidneys are the governor, they clean our blood for a very real way. And then also, kidneys are where we experience life itself. So in the Nijing too, the area where the weaver sits, that is very clearly the low back, that's called the gate of life. And that is where the kidneys are. So I don't know if you're noticing, contemplating these things while looking at these charts is creating a more deeply connected somatic link if you want there to be, right? I mean, this is like a fairy tale environment, this inner landscape. There's a reason for that. There's a reason these are fairy tale like creatures, right? There's a reason. The reason is, I believe, because those little parts of us, like our inner children, who are still attuned to wonder and like amazing and magic and wow, I feel like that's what gives the Shen the space and the place to do what they do. And then we get to have that lived experience of resonance. And resonance is how we can also become more, or at least find how, I don't, I, I really don't like empathy being defined as an ability, but it's defined as an ability. Playfulness, bringing more ease. That's nice. I like that. Yeah. Do I have a cat on my shoulder? No. Okay. So I pulled the systems view of life, Friedhof Capra. I feel very guilty that I have not been a fan of Capra my whole life because I have been reading him and just not knowing it. This is a new book of his, but he writes about consciousness and the body. Let me find it. He's a fancy pants professor, so this is like big brain stuff, but I think I can make it easy for um, parallels between science and mysticism. Gotta love a physicist who's not afraid to say that. 285. Parallels between science and mysticism. Ooh. Among the first modern scientists to make comparisons were some of the leading physicists of the 20th century, who had struggled to understand the strange and unexpected reality revealed to them in their explorations of atomic and subatomic phenomena. It is a thick book and a very small font. He gives us three quotes here, Bohr, Heisenberg, and Oppenheimer. Woo! Okay. Oppenheimer is why we have the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer in 1954 says, the great notions about human understanding, which are illustrated by discoveries in atomic physics, are not in the nature of things wholly unfamiliar, wholly unheard of, or new. Even in our culture, they have a history, and in Buddhist and Hindu thought are more considerable and central place. He still gave us that bomb. I cannot speak to Hinduism. The only Buddhism I can speak to is Vajrayana Buddhism, as I've been guided by a Dzogchen master from Tibet. Um, I don't, I have yet to read a scientist writing about Buddhism and Taoism who actually understands what it means to be non-dual. And that's because all you need to be non-dual is three things. There's no problem. So part of what happens, I think, at least very much in Chinese cosmology, all of Chinese cosmology is like the same logic problem everywhere. All the numbers pretty much mean the same. The entities are pretty much doing the same. You have the same this, you have the same that. It's amazing. But these guys have a tendency to make them each different and distinct so that the I Ching is distinct from yin and yang or the five, and it's not. At least that's just how I perceive what they share. And also, I just think it's fascinating that we had to go atomic to contemplate consciousness, the mind and life. No, I don't want to talk about Buddhism. Beautiful spiritual dimension of education. Weak experiment, life, mind, and society. Evolutionary link between consciousness and social phenomena. Around 4 million years ago, an extraordinary confluence of events occurred in the evolution. Oh, this is good. In the evolution of primates, with the appearance of the first upright walking apes. The upright walking apes are illustrated, they're visualized in the Nijing 2 through yin and yang. Yin and yang very specifically speak to plantar fascia and the experience of being a mammal that walks on 2 feet. This is a human, but that's what the yin and the yang indicate here. Whether or not these Shen show up in other species, I have not yet uncovered. I would think they do, particularly with sentient species. From an evolutionary perspective, this is big fancy pants science guy. It's natural to ground the understanding of social phenomena in a unified conception of life and consciousness. Indeed, the system's view of life attempts to integrate biological, cognitive, and social dimensions. Biological, cognitive, and social translates to biopsychosocial, the biopsychosocial model of health and wellness in particular, where there's a movement, a shift, a growth, things that folks are trying to do in like really prototypically Western regimented contexts to involve more of a patient's environment. And that approach is called biopsychosocial. Biopsychosocial is visualized in the Nijing 2 through the belly as bio, the head as psycho, and the heart as social. It is envisioned in the Shen as they exist bio, they exist in our organs, and they can operate psycho and social. So it totally goes together. Thank you, Dr. Capra. Structuralism. That's going to be way too many syllables. Okay. I think it's time for Katie to eat, take a shower. Thank you, Capra. Yeah, he's pretty cool. I want to uh um now that I've had this contemplation, I'm going to write another thing for Substack on complexity, just some notes on complexity and systems thinking and how the Shen help with that. And then I probably will come back later and we can talk about triangles. Because I did all of my big girl adulting this morning. I was done with it by 2 o'clock. I don't even know what to do with myself. Yes, darling. Oh, you're so pretty. Okay, it's time for me to go. I'll see you. Bye. Bye. Oh, Kitty.